First of all, I want to thank you all for being here and for your service to our country. And I want to start by saying, just returned from a trip to Afghanistan, and I am particularly impressed with the continued dedication of our men and women in uniform out there, not limited to, but particularly including the Marines and sailors, who we may not expect to see in the desert, but often do. They're doing terrific work, and I really appreciate what they're doing. I hope you'll pass our thanks on to those folks. We know we've given them a tough mission. We have difficult decisions to make here as well, and I don't think anyone would suggest that any of you have an easy job. Just looking at an article from Inside the Navy recently, Secretary Mabus, you were quoted, looking ahead at some of the potential future budget constraints that we might face in the coming years, as having said, expected future resource streams will severely constrain our choices, and that reducing Navy and Marine Corps programs to within available resources may require difficult and undesirable choices. I couldn't agree with you more. It's a tough position that we're in, having to make some decisions in a constrained environment. You were also quoted as saying we need to be prepared to rethink old assumptions and reevaluate past practices. Again, I agree with that. We have to make tough decisions based on scarce resources. We have heard a number of issues raised by many members of this committee about how we're going to spend our resources and our military dollars. And of course, we'd all like to make sure that they're spent in the most efficient and effective way possible. I will tell you, and I'm sure it's going to be no surprise to you to hear me say that I was disappointed to see in the final QDR language a sentence recommending moving a carrier to Mayport, Florida, and investing a substantial amount of money in building that home port, which would be the 5th U.S. nuclear carrier home port. We've talked about it before, that's why I don't think you're going to be surprised to hear from me about it today, but I'll tell you I was disappointed in a number of things, and one was in what I see as a lack of transparency in the decision-making process that led up to that. I'll give you a couple examples of why that troubles me. And we talked with the Secretary and Admiral Mullen about it in the past couple of weeks. We heard from Secretary Gates that he essentially affirmed a statement that Senator Nelson said that he had told him about a little over 2 months prior to the QDR being issued that, and I want to make sure I get the wording right, but he said, I think that they had nothing to worry about. We saw some drafts of the QDR come out around December that suggested that the optimal solution would actually be a backup port in Mayport rather than a full home port, and then different language come out in the final version a few weeks later. I asked Admiral Mullen about it in his testimony. He said essentially that it was a judgment call. We have asked over the past year for some more strategic analysis of the risk that we're trying to mitigate in Norfolk. And I'm unsatisfied with the fact that I don't think we've really received that. Now, Undersecretary Flournoy said essentially they had been given 2 viable options to assess and choose between having a backup port or having a full 5th nuclear carrier home port in Mayport. And apparently, according to the QDR language, a decision was made to go with the one that costs a lot of money. Now, we can argue about the cost, somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion. We think it's going to be on the upper end of that. As I mentioned, I was disappointed with the transparency of the process or lack thereof, but I've asked for a GAO study to be conducted, which has started to lay out on the table all the potential costs included in this type of decision so we can make that tough decision about how we're going to allocate those defense dollars. But Admiral Ruffett, I just wanted to ask you one question. Admiral Mullen said in his testimony when I asked him about this, about the strategic dispersal issue, and I think you used the words today, eggs in one basket kind of idea. And I asked Admiral Mullen if that type of thinking or philosophy would apply to every military asset or base that we've got, not simply nuclear home port for carriers, but every other base, including SSBNs put in Georgia and other things like strategic bombers. And he said essentially that, yes, it does apply to anything that we're going to have to evaluate like that. Would you agree with Admiral Mullen on that?
I would agree that we have to take a good look at where we have the redundancies that are important, and you cite the case of a strategic ballistic missile submarine. Their home port is in Georgia, but I can take that ship to Groton, Connecticut and maintain it there. I can take that ship to Norfolk, Virginia and maintain it there. So I have 3 options, even for ballistic missile submarines. The aircraft carrier on the east coast of the United States is the only ship I have that I do not have another option to put into to do either routine or emergent maintenance.
Another option on the East Coast, although there are 3 others on the West Coast, just to make sure we're clear on that. I think I'm out of time. I will submit additional questions for the record, but appreciate we're going to continue working going forward on this to find the right use of our defense dollars, and appreciate the work you put into it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Sutton.